Hello there, and welcome to a new episode of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring podcast. With me, Gaydien. I am back again! Probably not that long ago. How long ago was the last episode?
Okay, yeah, that has been quite some time. I do apologize, everyone. Let's get right into it, shall we?
We begin at minute 15 with Gandalf knocking at Bilbo's green door, and then at minute 20 with Sam thrown into the arms of his future wife. Well, things seem to have escalated rather quickly. Gandalf proves Frodo right, being a disturber of peace. But now, our favourite segment of the show. Things I didn't know last episode but found out while making this one. Today there are more things I overlooked or didn't care to look up because I was too excited to just analyze a hobbit and a wizard. We begin very simple, very easy, very good. The horse.
Really, mate? The horse? You're gonna talk about the horse?
Yes. So, this horse, which is pulling Gandalf's cart, is actually a Shire horse. I'm not kidding. There is a breed called Shire. As the name suggests, they are named after the English word Shire because their breed was developed in the British countryside, and it is used for its primary purpose here in the film. They are bred for size, strength, and their easygoing nature. The Shire horse was used extensively to pull carts of ale from breweries to public houses. And later in World War II, they then would pull carts full of rations and other necessities. Today, the breed is mostly used for foresting and leisure riding, given that they are pretty chill in their behavior. Now, if Peter Jackson actively wanted a Shire horse pulling Gandalf's cart getting into the Shire, I don't know. Most likely it's a happy accident. But I'd like to believe that someone of the film crew thought that this tiny detail is necessary, because Gandalf is very much Shire themed, and he needed more of that. Now, another thing I didn't really get into in the previous episode was on how Elijah Wood and Ian McKellen got their roles in this film. And I have to say, it was quite interesting to read about that, on how things were done back in the day. Ah yes, you know, the good old days, the 90s. Elijah Wood, Frodo, actually auditioned somewhat unorthodoxly, well at least for the time. Remember that it was 1999. So since everybody and their mum was auditioning for this project because it was Lord of the Rings and everybody and their grandfather knew this book, Elijah also wanted to put himself forward. However, he couldn't audition live in front of Peter Jackson because he just wasn't in town. Well, Elijah wasn't. So instead, he recorded himself dressed as he imagined the Hobbit would look like from, well, The Hobbit. And as a VHS tape recording, he arrived at Peter Jackson's address. Now today there's a bit more standard practice, well not as a VHS tape, but as a file, because there are just so many people these days, and you can file through them rather quickly today. But in 1999, that was some luck and effort as well. Again, VHS tapes were a bit more complicated than video files. Ah yeah, 1999, the good old days. Now, Ian McKellen was not super keen at first to play Gandalf. Now, I was wondering, why the heck would you not be interested in that? Well, mainly because he had no idea about the story. Which, granted, makes sort of sense, but okay. I'm very impressed, you know, that somebody who fits really much on that age range, similar to Christopher Lee, and he has not come across it once. Or at least, he had not read it in a very long time. There also was the opportunity for him to be in the next Mission Impossible movie too, but he turned that down because they didn't give him the full script and he didn't know to what he would commit nor how to properly play this character. And they didn't give him the full script in fear of spoilers that he would tell a lot of people. Yeah, he probably wouldn't have, but he turned down the role for that. But Peter Jackson kept his spot open because he really wanted him, and thanks to the legends of Robert Shea and Bryan Singer, two very important movie producers, they managed to wrap Ian's time up quicker for X-Men so he could actually go to New Zealand on time. Robert, Bryan, I had no idea who you guys were before this podcast episode, but thank you 1,000 lifetimes. And don't worry about the others, how they get their roles. I will get to them. So far we only had Frodo and Gandalf in the focus, and we shall stay on that. Don't worry, I will talk about Ian Holm later, probably in the next podcast episode. But yeah, don't worry, they will come. Yeah, I think that's it. So, let's jump into the actual film. We begin at minute 15 at the garden gate and end at minute 20, where Frodo pushes Sam into the arms of the lovely Rosie to dance with her. Now that is a wing hobbit if I've ever seen one. Good job, Frodo. That's very stickleback of you. Finally, we see the green door under the hill proper. It is set into a round brick frame which seems unpainted. On either side you can see 2 round windows which I think have little to no purpose. Just look at the flora here. The grass from the hill and the plants in front are growing to such an extent that they begin to cover the view of these windows, as we later see in this episode. They aren't meant for one to look outside and are more used as a peephole to see if unwanted neighbors or unwanted relatives have shown up. Or, what's also possible is that Samwise is not as good as a gardener as he claims to be. Gandalf is standing in front of the door on a stony footpath which leads both to the front door and the garden to the left of the screen. His long, grey robe is draping at the end, his grey hat protects him from the sun, and his grey satchel probably has some weed in it that he really much needs. He truly is the Grey Wizard. I'm half expecting a name tag to show up above him like you have in the Smash Bros. Games. He's knocking with the long end of his staff at the green door and turns to the side to wait for a reply. Don't worry, Gandalf. It won't be long. Not when we check out the flowers in the background. A little further to the left, we see the beginning of Bilbo's garden. Pretty bright pink flowers are in full bloom. I believe those are orchids. Rose of Sharon, to be precise. They originate from China and India and are not native to New Zealand. They are often associated with love, beauty, and healing. You know, all the good things one would associate with a pretty flower like this. The Rose of Sharon was clearly chosen for making the Shire appear even purer, not because they are wonderful to look at and serve as a nice contrast to the lush green all around. Never know. The other bit of colour is a very bright purple, almost disappearing into green. My best guess is that this is just some more lavender, which would make sense that Bilbo would grow it in his own garden for tea and seasoning. Furthermore, we see a birdhouse on a pole made out of wood, and to the very right of the frame a wooden bench with a wooden bucket and a wooden bench stool. And there's also a basket made out of wood and cane. None of this is actual fragile. This bench as well is not made out of styrofoam, but actual wood. This is a true piece of furniture someone can sit on. We will see it in action later in this episode. Wait for us, bench. We will return. No, thank you, says the voice behind the door, almost to the surprise of Gandalf and railing us back into the film. We don't want any more visitors, well-wishers, or distant relations, declares Bilbo loudly and very annoyed. Throughout the day, probably a lot had come to bother him, probably asking what he's going to get them and also what he's going to do with the Bag End once he's dead. That's morbid, even for hobbits. We switch to Gandalf, fully in focus now, and with the beautiful summer sky in the background. He has a very warm smile and simply asks, "And what about very old friends?" To which the door almost immediately gets opened and we see a bewildered Bilbo stepping through. The music of the Shire kicks in not as loudly as it did before, but rather slow and gentle, like a maturer version of itself. From the shadow of the hall into the light of day, Bilbo moves forward. And with the camera looking over Gandalf's shoulder, we see Bilbo appear much shorter than the wizard. Again, a trick of the perspective. "Gandalf?" Bilbo asks. He almost can't believe to see his very old friend right now. And neither can I on how bloody fast he had opened the door for him. Merely a moment ago, Bilbo said that he didn't want to see anybody. There he sounded a small distance away from the door. Not too far away, but, far enough, like it was just around the corner. But when he heard Gandalf's voice, he instantly opened the door to him. So, were you right behind the door, listening like a creepy old man? Though given your age, that wouldn't be too far-fetched. Or are you just a flash among the hobbits? And why didn't you just look through the small peeping windows, or the massive glass window in the living room? So, the only place you could have been is right behind the door. But then again, why did you sound so much farther away than you actually were? Grant Major, I want an explanation for this, right now. Grant, Bilbo's proximity to the locked door was anything but grand. And Grant, could you please bring me some potatoes and put them in a stew? Thank you. We cut back to Gandalf, who's looking down on us with teary eyes, so happy to see Bilbo healthy and loudmouthed as he had left him 60 years ago. His face is full of wrinkles caused by smiling too much, and he goes, "Bilbo Baggins," and extends his right arm, ready to embrace the hobbit. And then we are back looking over Gandalf's shoulder and wait a moment, please. Do you see that? His right arm is not up. or ready to embrace Bilbo at all. It's just there, like a sad baguette. Mr. Grant Major, I have a continuity error for you to fix, otherwise I might lose myself, so you better fix it. Oh, go on. Bilbo is also close to tears and steps forward to hug his very old grey friend. My dear Gandalf, he says, and the Gandalf in question kneels down, taking him in. Can we just take this moment real quick and appreciate these old friends just being happy that they get to see each other again? Alright, thank you. Gandalf says that Bilbo has not aged a day for his 111 years. He looks at him puzzled and tries to figure out how that is even possible. Perhaps it's the Shire Weed, or the Hairy Feet, or the Wandering of Doom that can plunge the world into a second age of darkness. Face masks? Whatever it is, they start to laugh and then Bilbo invites him in. Now we get to see the beautiful interior entrance of Bilbo's home. And as guessed, the two small windows are not really for looking out, but for spying on whoever has arrived. It seems rather tidy here in comparison to his study. We see a big chest to the left, chairs on the right of the door where wood had been poorly stacked and even fallen off. The table against the right wall seems to be covered with letters and small gifts. Now I assume that those gifts are not for Bilbo, but for his guests. See, hobbits celebrate their birthdays in reversed fashion compared to ours. When a hobbit celebrates their birthday, that hobbit gives each guest a small present. Now this doesn't mean you can't bring the birthday hobbit anything, but I'd wager that those little wrapped gifts are from Bilbo, since they appear almost delicately wrapped, some even have a nice ribbon around it. And as we remember, Bilbo called some hobbits of rather simple nature, and I doubt that those could make such pretty gifts. Or maybe they do, since it's a hobbit thing to give others gifts rather than receiving them. Another mystery about the hobbits. Gandalf ducks his head in and then enters. Bilbo closes the door behind him and then takes Gandalf's hat and stuff. How sweet. So many years have passed and they still act like they do this every other Tuesday. Also, Ian McKellen is not that tall, and if you're wondering how he's towering over Ian Holm like it's nothing, well, there is a good reason for that. You see, Peter Jackson had a great idea to convey the size difference between hobbits and, well, the non-hobbits. Both actors were recorded on two different sets at the very same angle. Ian McKellen stood in front of a green screen in the scenes where he entered and then handed his things to Bilbo, limiting his interactions with the actual set. This way they could later place Gandalf into the actual set, without changing angles at all. You do see the strange hand movement from Gandalf as if he isn't entirely sure where Bilbo is, and he lets his things almost drop. So I assume that on his side there probably was someone taking the things away, hiding behind another green screen, while on the actual set Ian Holm was handed these things in the exact same position as they were. Even 22 years later, this looks so smooth and flawless. I'm glad that it was made in the early 2000s. Imagine it being made today with all the CGI that's plaguing pretty much every movie at this point. The film would have run the risk of looking very dated. Anyway, Bilbo offers Gandalf some tea, but then quickly switches to something stronger in his suggestion. He says that he has a few bottles of old vineyard left from the year 1296, and it's almost as old as he is. That number is in Shire reckoning, so it's not the normal year counting. For example, to give you an idea, right? In Shire reckoning, the Fellowship began its journey in 1480 of the Third Age, and by normal numbers that would be the year 3018 of the Third Age. So you see the difference there. Bilbo was born in the year 1290, making him 6 years older than the wine by Shire reckoning. The Hobbit offers Gandalf to open the bottle, but Gandalf refuses politely and asks for the tea that was offered instead. Gandalf promptly bumps into the chandelier in the entrance hall, and once he has settled that one, his head hits the wooden door frame to his right. I have to say that either Ian McKellen is a stunt legend for actually hitting his head there on purpose, or the sound team is making an absolute amazing job, because it does sound like someone just hit their head against some thick wood. Beside Gandalf's pane, we can see a coat hanger behind him, where about 5 different colored coats are hung up. Brown, dark red, blue, green, and dark brown? Not too sure, but I think it is. The blue one is the most apparent. Maybe it's one for each hobbit? I don't know. Bilbo, Frodo, Sam, Pippin, and Merry. Those are 5. Colours I'm not too sure, honestly. Blue could be Pippin, since he becomes a squire for Gondor. However, Gondor's colour is more silver and white, not blue, but I can see if someone were to make that distinction. Green would be for Merry, given his role with Eowyn of Rohan. Brown for Sam, and Earth, I guess, Garden? Dark brown then is Frodo, because Frodo is Sam's shadow in depression form, and Bilbo is red. I don't know why. Perhaps because his coat actually is red, this could actually be his old coat. Or also because his journal that he writes in is also red. So that is a lot of speculation for my part, I'm aware. Hey, maybe some person in the prop department thought,
Amen. I want to leave my mark on these films, the legend they will become, and the best way on doing that is to make each of the coat hangers a colour connected to the hobbits, so that one day a random dude on the internet can make the vague connection for me some 20 plus years later. Yes, I will do that. Me, a man of the prop department.
yeah, that sounds absolutely reasonable. The scene changes and we take in Gandalf's perspective again, looking into what appears to be a living area. A fireplace with roaring flames, and there are black smudges that show that it has been in use for generations, which is not really entirely true because only Bilbo and his parents have been here, and Frodo. It is multiple generations, but it's not that long. Also, the fireplace is shaped like a hobbit hole. So is the connecting hallway and the windows. I'm not too sure that the audience already is aware that a hobbit lives here. Better make it very obvious and clear. Hobbit holes everywhere. Above the fireplace there is a shell with a different array of things. A candle in a holder, an apple, a chest, something that looks like a ball. It looks like it's made of runners and wood. You know, similar to what the old basket outside the door, outside of the house, is made of. And on the wall itself we see the portraits of 2 hobbits, Bilbo's parents, Belladonna Took and Bungo Baggins. The name Belladonna is based on a plant which is also known as the Deadly Nightshade. And it can cause delirium and hallucination, and by too much ingestion, death. It is one of the deadliest plants we have. Wow. Okay, so was his mother a monster? She was a Took, so maybe. And the only other Took we know is Pippin, which we know is absolutely harmless and never causes destruction in any sense of the word. However, when heavily diluted, belladonna is used for medicine to reduce pain and lessen hyperactivity, among other things. Belladonna tea is very good. Well, it works for me, for instance. Alright? So, did his mom do drugs? I doubt it, since Belladonna, as a name, simply means beautiful lady, and it's custom in the Shire to name daughters after pretty flowers, and that's what Belladonna is. It is a pretty flower. For example, Sam's future wife is called Rosie. Belladonna Took was the youngest of 8 children, and with her 2 sisters, formed the remarkable Daughters of the Old Took. I mean, points for creativity are not handed out in the Shire, are they? Her father, the Old Took, was good friends with Gandalf, and because of that connection she also met the wizard early in her life and befriended him as well. The Took family is one of the oldest families and also one of the richest families in the Shire. They were the ones that had a tendency for adventures and going after danger rather than hiding from it. Just a simple example. During the Battle of the Greenfields, Bandobra's Took knocked off the head of King Golfimbul, a goblin, and it flew 100 yards right into a rabbit hole, creating the sport of golf. The Tooks were very proud of that one. But next to her being the daughter of the Old Took and the youngest of her siblings, little is known about her. We never really get a chapter where Bilbo's reminiscing about his parents, neither in The Hobbit nor in Lord of the Rings, and then again, these stories are not really all about that. Bilbo's father, Bungo Baggins, was the oldest of his siblings, and we know even less about him. We know he was the eldest of 5 children, he made wine, and he had some impact on Bilbo for sure, because during his adventures, he quoted his father, and one of the quotes is, "While there is life, there is hope," which is a very hobbitish thing to say, quite honestly. It is something that I could see Sam say. The greatest achievement of both sides was the construction of Bag End. After Bungo and Belladonna had married, they went to work and built the most beautiful and luxurious hobbit hole there is. And we are in that one right now. Speaking of construction, the respectable Grand Major was one of the production designers when it came to the sets. Next to Rivendell and Moria, he was also involved in the creation of Hobbiton. Together with the artists John Howe and Ellen Lee, they managed to give us this Middle-earthian feel. The place looks lived in. There are scratches, edges and corners are splintered away a bit. Nothing is flawless and perfect. I really like that. Recent productions always look fresh and out of packaging, making it look, well, unnatural to a degree. No major city, state or home looks so perfect when exposed to the elements or a family for multiple generations. If I were to go beyond the border of the screen, what would I find? More of this building or more of just the end of a set, and it would just end. Back to Bilbo's home. Similar to his office, we see little order. There is a vase with flowers, a picture of sorts covered by said flowers, another 2 candles, and... hang on, what is that? Those are books. I see books on the floor, scattered, without any care in the world. That's it. I don't care. I'm gonna go. I will go to Middle Earth. I will walk to Middle Earth and back just to smack a fucking Baggins. I will make... Let's try to focus again, shall we? There is a rug in front of the fireplace. I can't really tell what the design is, but that's often the case with these rugs. It's just a rectangular mandala with a repeating pattern of flowers? It looks like a singular flower was copy-pasted 5 times per row, and the border is wide and has a warm beige and sort of has red stripes in an arching form. My grandma had one of those. I'm pretty sure everybody's grandma had one of those. Then we see a chair way too far away from the table in front of it. Either Bilbo has forgotten to put it back, or some set designer thought to place it like such, so we can adore it and look at it in all its wooden glory. Thanks, it's a chair. Well done, guys. Behind the chair, there is some sort of nook, maybe a place where Bilbo keeps some little trinkets, because I do see, ever so slightly, a small dresser right behind the chair with 2 glasses on top of it. The table in the left of the frame is full with parchment and maps. I see a plate with half-eaten toast and a small mark in front of it as well. Maybe Bilbo was in the middle of eating something before Gandalf showed up. However, I do believe it might be Frodo's, since it is broad daylight and he could have been seen from outside. I'm mentioning this for later, keep that in mind. All in all, you can feel that someone was in the middle of doing something and just decided to drop everything at once to shoo away whoever was at the door. Quite unsuccessful, I might add. Bilbo is running around in his kitchen, talking more about Gandalf than to him. How he comes and goes as he pleases, the different suggestions for food, finding some cheese as he picks up a plate and walks back to where he came from. All the while the camera remains in the Gandalf perspective and we move closer to the table with all the parchments and maps. In an old frame, we can see the beaten up map that is most likely the very map the company of Thorin used 60 years ago. It shows us the Lonely Mountain and a little bit of Smaug. I also suspect that the many papers below the frame could be the contract Bilbo had signed to become the burglar of the company. We change perspective and are now before Gandalf as he picks up the frame, and yes, now we see it clearly, this is the map of the Lonely Mountain, with the old runes and everything, even with the door riddle, which goes as follows. Stand by the grey stone with the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole. We remember the thrush is a type of bird and not the infectious disease that it sounds like. Smaug's clearly seen here next to the mountain, and if that wasn't enough to convince you with the zoom that we are getting of the desolation of Smaug, king on the mountain, and the Lonely Mountain even with the red dragon on it, I don't know how to help you. This map was made by Daniel Reeve, a calligrapher who worked on both the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. All the scrolls and maps, every parchment prop you see has been designed by him, well, at least under his supervision for sure. Fun fact! Did you know that Smaug was the last fire drake of Arda? The first dragons were made by Morgoth and then they later bred on their own without his interventions and such, and that's how we got different varieties of dragons. Smaug here is a fire drake. Drakes are the winged ones that can breathe fire. Others, for instance, the worms, could breathe fire, but they couldn't fly because they didn't have wings. The largest and most powerful of those was Ancalagon the Black. He was a huge monster, like as big as a mountain, and he lived for a day. Well, we don't know that for sure, but he showed up one day and fought on that day, and then he was slain by Eärendil. Wow, what a weapon. Literally lasted just a day. That's the definition of a glass cannon, my dude. What happened there? What is... Okay, Ancalagon definitely is a dragon. What was Eärendil? A fairy-type Pokemon? Perhaps Morgoth should have read about the type matchup before that day. That surely would have helped him. Suddenly, Bilbo! He offers Gandalf to make some eggs if he likes, but we then cut further back and see that Bilbo looks confused and a little startled almost. He looks left and right because Gandalf is not there anymore. That's because he's right behind you! No wonder people confuse him and Dumbledore all the time. Both of them went to the same appear behind someone silently course. Gandalf declines the egg offer and settles for tea. Bilbo gets a bit jump scared. I would be too, if I'm honest. Sure, he's a wizard, but I still would struggle to accept that he just did the trick of become air and then become solid right behind you again. Again, also, Bilbo is 111 years old. Heart attacks are very much a thing, Gandalf. I'm not too sure why Bilbo looks almost concerned in this shot. He reminds me of a teenager caught in a lie or found doing something he wasn't supposed to. But so far, Bilbo has been a good little hobbit, hasn't he? At this point in time, he doesn't know that his ring is the One Ring, and neither does Gandalf. So why does he look so caught, red-handed? Anyway, Gandalf takes a seat and Bilbo begins to eat, asking if he minds, but because Gandalf is Gandalf, he doesn't mind at all. So Bilbo continues on for one more second, and then we hear someone hammer at the door, and he presses himself against a wall, hiding away, and there's a female voice calling out to him. Bilbo? Bilbo Baggins? He looks frantically to Gandalf, saying that he is not home. What the hell? Who did you piss off, Bilbo? Was it the female hobbit from before that has this unnatural hatred for Gandalf? Gandalf gives him a look of, alright, and what is going on? But instead of answering the unspoken question of Gandalf, Bilbo sneaks up closer to the window, with plates still in hand. I remind you, hobbits love their food and their meals. They have breakfast twice, for goodness sake. We take position in front of Bilbo, and as he looks out of the window, this gives us the great chance to see some more of the decor in the kitchen. A vase that looks olive green or yellow, I can't really tell. A massive water jug, at least it is one, because it really has the shape of one. On the window seat we see more pictures, and there is the image of a female hobbit. It is too out of focus to really make out who that could be, but it's enough recognizable to say that this is not his mum. It could be a previous flame of his before he met the one, the only, Thorin Oakenshield.
Oh, yes, behind me.
It could also be Frodo's mum, who knows? Bilbo explains that it is the SACKVILLES Bagginses. We remember that the family tree is rather large and the SACKVILLES are a branch of cousins to both Bilbo and Frodo. They are after the house, he says, never forgiven me for living this long. He jumps back to Gandalf and moans on how they never give him a moment's peace. He wants to see mountains again, like he did when he was younger. Sounds to me Bilbo is in a midlife crisis. Well, end-life crisis. Hobbits can grow old, up to 100 years and a little bit over that, but Bilbo's age is unique and his health only upheld by the One Ring. So by Hobbit standard, he is old, and way too old, to have a midlife crisis. But honestly, we know that feeling. You're stuck in a dull and boring routine, you're surrounded by people you don't like and they annoy the crap out of you, and it just goes on every single day, and you never have a break, and your mind is going mental, and it's just, oh my god, look at all that food! A hobbit hole is not a hobbit hole if there isn't enough food on the table, and window sills, and other free surfaces. There is a block of cheese, a pudding, a pie of some sort, freshly baked bread, not even cut by any blade, several jars with, I assume, jam in them. I see also a small pot for the tea, and also one for the milk. To the right side of Bilbo's feet, I see a sack full of carrots. On the shelf in the left of the kitchen, I see another pie? Why is there pie? Who stores pie on the top of a shelf in the kitchen? Bilbo Baggins, that's who. The same hobbit who treats his books like unwanted children at a theme park. neglectful. Anyway, we see some more jams on the window seam and a rag for the plates to be placed in, and we can make out some colour and filigree designs on them. They are not just plain white or made out of wood. No. They almost look like china. You know, the material, not the country. So do hobbits have a hobbit china? And what would that be called? There is no china in Arda. There is Rhun, though, the eastern region of Middle-earth. Is this Rhun-inspired design? But the people of Rhun were loyal to Sauron, and I'm pretty sure the hobbits have no idea that Rhun even exists. And vice versa. Did they come up with it themselves, or did an elf show them how to paint on plates? Why would hobbits even need china-like plates if they tend to eat all the time, wherever and whenever? Or are these here just for show for Bilbo? But even that's the case. But then again, who made these? Also, the small kitchen window looks like a hobbit hole. Bilbo, like myself, keeps on rambling a bit, saying he needs to find a quiet place where he could finish his book, and I never thought to reach a point in my life where I agree with Bilbo Baggins of the Lord of the Rings trilogy full-heartedly. A place only for me and for my writing? Sign me the fuck up. That sounds like an absolute heaven to me. I get you 100%, Bilbo. That sounds like an introvert's dream. He then remembers the tea and walks over to the fireplace where the kettle is already going. I assume that he had the kettle ready before, because no way in hell did that boil up so quickly between Gandalf responding with just tea and right now. Since it's midday, this is probably left over from 11cs, which is a thing between second breakfast and lunch. Gandalf replies with asking if Bilbo still means to go through with his plan, the plan being to leave the Shire and give everything to Frodo. So this conversation obviously has happened before, and it can't have been that too long ago, and oh my god, there is more food! Tomatoes, sausages, something that looks like brownies, and scones? Holy hobbit hole, this is a lot for just 2 hobbits. Even I think so, and I'm a big boy. Is Bilbo traumatized from the time the dwarves had eaten away nearly his entire food supply? Is he compensating since then? Anyway, the 2 friends seem to have talked about this before, but Gandalf and Bilbo reacted like they hadn't seen each other for years. So did that talk take place all these years ago, or did they stay in touch with letters? I doubt that, because Gandalf doesn't live anywhere. Regardless, Bilbo confirms the question, saying that all the arrangements are in place as he pours the hot water into the teapot. We cut to a close shot of Gandalf, and he tells Bilbo that Frodo suspects something, and I cannot just say that he looks amazing in this shot. He looks both knowing and kind, open and secretive. Perhaps it's the entire wizard get-up as well, but his expression carries this ageless wisdom of many eons. Shout out to Rick Findlater of the makeup department. He wasn't the only one there, of course, but he got nominated for his work for both The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So I assume he had a role similar to a head of department. If so, well done, my man. Excellent contouring and shading. Ian looks old but ageless. Well done. Cut over to Bilbo, who says, almost insulted, of course he is. He's a Baggins. As if Frodo could do any less than suspect his uncle of doing something unusual and suspicious. We later learn that Bilbo took Frodo in not just because he felt he had to, but also because he hoped that Frodo might be like him, a Baggins with wit, not fat and complacent like the others. And he was right. Frodo did turn out like that. He's still a hobbit through and through, but he's very mindful and much more inward than others. But we'll get to that when we get to it. For now, Bilbo says that Frodo is not some block-headed brack-girdle from Heartbottle. I love these overly specific insults they have for each other. It's wonderful. Now, the reason why Bilbo uses these words is due to his disliking of Lobelia's Sackville Baggins. See, she is from Heartbottle, which is a small settlement in the northern region of the Shire. The family, Brackgirdle, is actually Lobelia's family, because she married into the Sackvilles. So Bilbo referring to Frodo as someone who isn't like them is a big compliment, but not so much for Lobelia and Otho Sackville. At this point in time, I really have to say that I love this attention to detail here. Sure, for a normal viewing this sounds like any random blabbering of words by an elderly gentleman, but there is an actual meaning behind these words. Peter Jackson really cared for this world and the characters in them, and he tried to bring them out of the pages and onto the screen. And this is what I would imagine Bilbo Baggins say. He is open and doesn't really censor himself ever since the event with the dragon. Back to the film though. I will praise Jackson and his team many times over, don't you worry. Gandalf then asks if Bilbo's planning to tell Frodo, and the Hobbit just waves it off and says yes, yes, very dismissively. And we see Gandalf again up close with such a warm expression, telling Bilbo that Frodo really is fond of his uncle. And look at that face, the spark of compassion, the little raised corner of his mouth. It's just, aww. We then see Bilbo from what I suspect is Gandalf's perspective as he contemplates a little more, giving himself actual time to think about Frodo and their relationship. He knows that Frodo cares for him a lot, and so does he, and therefore his mood now changes. He becomes somber and almost sad. The music begins to fade in and out like a wave of sort, and it feels like it's this push and pull we experience when we really need to do something, but there is someone or something holding us back, pulling us back. Bilbo says that he expects that Frodo would come with him if he'd ask, and you can see that part of him wouldn't mind that at all. But there is another part, a larger part, a wiser one, that knows that Frodo loves the Shire more. And sure, Frodo has said many times that he'd love to travel beyond the Shire and see all the different things that Bilbo has seen in his travels, but still, to wish for the things outside and to know what is outside are two different things, both of which Bilbo is very familiar with. Bilbo then waddles over to the window and Gandalf looks at him with this examining expression. Well, it's neutral, mostly. We then cut back to them in the same shot and Bilbo looks outside, saying that he is old. I mean, yeah, you are. It's your 111th birthday. He then turns around. I know I don't look it, he says, and his expression is almost strained. We see his hand almost immediately goes for his pocket, the very same the one ring is in. And even Gandalf notices and gives his hand a questioning glare as Bilbo continues to explain. We zoom in close to the hand touching the ring, as if to draw upon its power to feel a little better, younger perhaps. The music throughout is still coming and going, but when he began to touch the ring it dropped, just a little bit, but it quickly returns when he sits down and doesn't touch it any longer. Because, you know, the one ring can doom the Shire, and it makes sense for musically speaking, it makes a lot of sense that why the music would drop when the one ring is involved. Bilbo explains that he feels very thin, like butter on too much bread, and bite of our life, that isn't a great expression for a burnout, and I don't know what is. The feeling of there not being enough of you. You still have your life, your surroundings, and everything else, that being the bread, and usually you have enough of yourself to fill to the crust of that bread. You are the butter in this case. He says this as he sits down, like an old man, which, well, he is, but he doesn't look it. Bilbo looks suddenly weak like this, like he was running low on air. And we see Gandalf look at him with a very worried expression. It's a serious worried expression. We all do that one when someone tells us that they are not doing too well. You care about them and you're listening intently to every word they say in hopes to help them in any way you could. And as Bilbo finishes his bread anecdote, we see Gandalf's collection of hair in the left shake up and down, nodding to what his friend is saying. He understands all too well, I can imagine. As a Maya sent to undermine Sauron, I see Gandalf having burnouts all over the place throughout his life here. Bilbo then says that he needs a very long holiday, one he doesn't expect to return from. Okay, that sounds morbid. Please, Bilbo, you can talk to some professionals, please. The camera zooms in on his face, and he looks away into nowhere, really. Maybe he sees a map on the floor in the other room. Who knows with the system of throwing valuable things on the floor wherever you please. He declares that he does not intend to come back. Cut! Next scene. We are outside, it is night, and we are looking down to the beginning of festivities. We see the large tent, several smaller ones, the yellow banner for Bilbo, and many lanterns illuminating the place. And into view come both Gandalf and Bilbo, who are smoking some pipeweed together. The tense music from before is now replaced with a playful and relaxed rendition of the Shire theme. And here, the bench is again. See, I told you it'll come back. It's actually being used as a proper bench. And it's standing right where we left it. Wonderful job, Grant. For the continuity, you get a little star. You did your best. Well done. We cut to the two and we see that they are in front of the Hobbit Hall. The door is wide open, the lights are on, and every nasty bug, moth and mosquito is very much welcome. Well done, Bilbo. Fuck Frodo, am I right, and all the itchy stings he later has to endure. We hear Bilbo say, "Old Toby, the finest weed in the South Farding." Old Toby is referring to the inventor, Torvald Hornblower. Torvald was a well-known gardener in the Shire and became popular very quickly due to his successful cultivation of the weed, now named after him. But we know not much else. We don't really know where he learned the craft of making weed. It is speculated that he learned it from the men of Bree, but again, that's a speculation among hobbits, and he died in the 27th century of the Third Age. And as a reminder, the Fellowship takes place in the year 3018, that is the 29th century of the Third Age. Bilbo takes a long breath and blows out a ring of smoke, and we see Gandalf follow it a bit static. I guess there either wasn't an actual ring and then it was later added into the scene, and he just had nothing to look at this moment and he had to use his imagination, or due to how he was sitting next to Ian Holm with the Force perspective and all, he had to look a little strange to follow it properly. Cutting to behind them, the ring now has become a beautiful round shape and hovers right in front of them, which makes little to no sense for me, because before, Bilbo blew it away, so it was travelling past Gandalf. Why is it now in front of them? Gandalf thinks, well, I can do that better, and even on brand. So he blows out a smoke cloud in form of a ship. A ship, alright, what the hell? It sails through the air and passes through the ring like it's the barrier between this world and Valinor, and then it crumbles away. Even for Bilbo, this is so amazing that he gives us a little gasp of excitement. But now why a ship exactly? Well, that's easy because I said it before. It is for Valinor. After all, Gandalf is a Maya who originally is from Valinor, and the only way to reach it in his current form is via ship. So, is this an indication of Gandalf feeling homesick? Are the 1,000 years of battle taking their toll on the wizard? Meh, who knows? He's an elderly wizard who loves to brag and show off. Look at this face. Is this a face of someone who is homesick? No. This face loves to show off what it can do well. Well, the body attached to the face, not the face. Oh god, you know what I mean. Bilbo then says that this will be a night to remember. Cut! Fireworks! We see a large, green, sparkly firework going off and we hear children screaming excitedly. Their screams of joy are then soon mixed with the noise of the adults equally joyful, and green sparkles become golden and then red, while they jingle like little bells for Christmas. Music starts to play, and it's a mix of flutes, drums, viols, and other things that you would expect at a medieval fantasy tavern. Fun fact! Gandalf is the inventor of fireworks, well, at least here in Middle-earth. As to why, I'm not too sure. Nobody is. It is a theory that this is how he can use the Ring of Power Narya, which is the Ring of Fire, in the most non-threatening way, and can bring others joy. Given that Gandalf is the most compassionate among the wizards, that seems plausible to me. Back to the film, we descend from the sky with the sparkles and see the massive party in full swing. Hobbits are clapping and dancing, and pipes are playing a happy tune. A massive, and I mean massive, cake is coming into the scene, and we even get a shot for just the cake. It has white icing all the way around, fruits and flowers are placed around it as well, and holy fire hazard of Narya, that's too many candles. I could count them all, but I trust Grand Major for once that those are indeed 111 candles burning hot on a cake. That's a lot of wax. We cut to a dancing Frodo going up and down on the dance floor. Go get it, Frodo. We zoom out and he does it all over again. What a hobbit. We get a few more shots of more hobbits asking for drinks, filling their drinks, jumping and dancing, and it becomes very clear these people love to party. But our party has to wait a little while, because now we see a shy Samwise turning around, looking at Rosie. Ah, what a beauty she is. Rosie, or Rose Cotton, has known Sam all her life, since both their families are practically neighbours, and it seems that our dear Sam has developed a crush. Aww. He quickly turns away, almost shocked when she looks at him. Maybe she wanted to talk to him or not? Whatever the case, she dances, and we cut to Bilbo shaking hands with some older hobbits. They are probably asking how he keeps so well in shape, and when he dies, and who gets back, and probably as morbid as the hobbits are. An out-of-breath Frodo sits next to Sam, trying to get him to dance himself. Man, to see Frodo so full of life and joy is such a nice thing, because he will need everything he can get now, because he won't have much time after. He tells Sam that he should ask Rosie for a dance, and Sam tries to avoid this suggestion by getting another ale, but Frodo grabs him and just throws him onto the dance floor, right into Rosie's arms. But before we continue, Sean Astin, the lovable actor who now is immortalized as Samwise Gamgee. The man didn't even know about Lord of the Rings before this film. He had never read the books. One day his wife came in and said, "You must have mastered an English accent in a day for this particular role." And so he said, "Okay, I will do that. What is this about?" So he went out and got the books immediately. And he couldn't even name Tolkien correctly. Lovely. Ironically, he had just finished his literature degree at UCLA, and he didn't know Tolkien, who's a big figure in literature. What is the curriculum at UCLA, quite honestly? There's a problem with the uni and not him. But anyway, he knew what to do with Sam because Sam was a gardener, and in his literature studies, stories and books were treated like gardens. You can go there, make things grow, see how they turn out, and as a reader, escape a little bit from your daily worries. Now, Sean had a little head start. His dad and Peter Jackson knew each other already, and they had met previously. So, Jackson already liked Sean. Even the casting director, Victoria Burrows, was familiar with him because she had casted his dad and brother in the past. So it was nearly impossible for him to fail and get this role.
Nepotism!
So, he went to audition, then was invited to do another live reading before the casting directors, and boom! He got the part, and what a fantastic Samwise he turned out to be. But enough about Sam. Returning to Frodo, the one, the only, Frodo Baggins, wingman, who so adorably and very elegantly has managed to throw Sam into the arms of the one girl he really likes. So cute. But will that end well? Will Sam pop the question? Will Rosie dance with him the entire night? And what will Bilbo do once he dies? All these questions have to wait because we have reached the 5-minute mark again, and with it, the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. Sorry for the massive break, a lot has happened in my life. One of which being my computer literally dying and I had to get a new one and set everything up again. That was stressful, but I'm glad I have a new one. But I'm also finding my rhythm again in general, and I hope to make more videos in general. Not always the podcast, but I'll see what I'll do. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to hear you soon in the next one. And until next time, do take care, be safe, bye-bye.